Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. On behalf of His Excellency Armando Varricchio, the Italian ambassador to the United States, the honorary patron of this conference, benvenuti to the Italian Embassy. A warm welcome to all speakers, especially those who have traveled all the way from Italy. Ester Coen, professor of art history at the Università degli Studi dell'Aquila, Daniele Fiorentino, professor of US history and political science, Università degli Studi Roma 3, and Sergio Cortesini, assistant professor of art history, Università di Pisa. And of course, a very special welcome to all our guests. I'm glad so many of you made it tonight on this beautiful fall evening. As head of the Cultural Affairs Office of this embassy, let me say how proud I am to have partnered up, together with the Italian Institute of Culture, with an organization as prestigious as the Smithsonian American Art Museum. We're delighted to hold the keynote of this two-day symposium on Italian soil. As you know, tonight's event is a sister conference to a fascinating event held in Rome last year at the American Academy of Rome on hybrid republicanism, Italy and American art, 1840 to 1918. However, the Course of Empires will focus on a broader, but certainly no less interesting period, encompassing the previous one, and specifically on American-Italian cultural relations from 1770 to 1980, spanning the births of our respective countries to the Cold War. The program analyzes the intrinsic allure that the cultural achievements of ancient Rome and the Renaissance have long held for American and Italian artists, with an eye to expanding the knowledge of our two countries' cultural relations by incorporating differing voices and views. I, for one, very much look forward to tonight's discussion and to the insights that two different but complementary speakers will provide. Renato Miracco, curator, art critic, and our cultural attaché at the embassy, and Ester Coen, curator and professor of contemporary art at the Università dell'Aquila. I would be remiss if I did not recognize the generosity of those institutions that made this event possible. The Terra Foundation for American Art, with additional support provided by Purchase College, SUNY, Kenyon College, Università degli Studi Roma 3, Università di Pisa, and the American Academy in Rome. To conclude, let me just say that having read up on the previous conference, unfortunately I was not here to witness it, and confident that tonight's event will be more than its equal companion, before yielding the floor to our distinguished panelists, I would like to quote an Italian saying, "Non c'è due senza tre," which can roughly be translated as "there's no two without a three." So I hope we can look forward to another interesting conference in the near future. Before our distinguished panelists, let me pass the floor to Stephanie Stebik, the Margaret and Terry Stent Director of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, for her remarks. Thank you. Grazie.
Julia, it's lovely that you remind us that we are on Italian soil. How wonderful. Today we are in Italy, and tomorrow you will come to America as we host at the Smithsonian American Art Museum a full day of programming. I was joking earlier that we're delighted to host you, and we are grateful that many of you have an important characteristic aside from curiosity, hopefully a passion for American art and all things Italian too, but you also have Sitzfleisch, which is an important characteristic to have the ability to sit for a long time so that you enjoy and don't miss anything in terms of our programming. For those of you who have other obligations, I, for one, have to be at our other museum tonight for an opening. I'm happy to report we will be live webcasting the programming and also archiving it. So you will be able to watch the programming again in your pajamas on another occasion. My job tonight is simply to say grazie mille to our dear friends, particularly here at the Italian Embassy, beginning, of course, with the ambassador who hails from Venice, always important to know, His Excellency Armando Varricchio. I thank, of course, our friend Renato, and we'll say more about him in a moment, and also our dear friend who heads the Istituto Italiano di Cultura, and a good reminder to turn off your cell phones, Emanuele Amendola. So again, we are grateful for so much that the Italian Embassy has done for us, beginning with hosting us here tonight, a lovely reception to follow, bringing a few terrific scholars here from Italy, and then also, of course, starting us off with a great setting. I want to acknowledge we've worked with the Italian Embassy in the past on a notable film program some of you may have enjoyed, and also some family programming. And I know we will do more in the future. I also would say that because of our close partnership with the Italian Embassy, the Terra Foundation for American Art was delighted to be our sort of key sponsor for the programming. So I would be remiss if I did not thank my own team, who have spent a lot of energy putting all the wonderful logistics and details together. Amelia Gerlitz, our Director of Academic Programs and Fellowships, as well as Karen Lemmy, our Curator of Sculpture. I'm grateful for them as well. We are in for a very special treat tonight with our keynote talk, and Professor Ester Coen has quite a fan club here tonight. I'm happy to report that normal registration for such an occasion is 150 excited, curious people. We have 254 people coming for our conference, so I like to think that we're starting well and building in all that we do. Let me also remind you that learning never exhausts the mind. That's what Leonardo tells us. And so we will learn a lot about artists and moments and culture and dialogue, and we do it through the wonderful medium of art, which connects us all. Renato, who will be speaking next, is a dear friend, cultural attaché here. He has a certain flair and vigor and has a very full schedule, so we're lucky that we have his time. He's been in this role since 2009, as you may know, and also recently facilitated an important memo of understanding between the Italian and American governments and received a letter of merit from the State Department, as well as a green card, noting his exceptional skills. There's no debate about that. More impressively, in his free time somehow, he's also organized some 75 exhibitions. I want to point out the Morandi show that we all loved at the Met in 2008, more recently, and then at Tate Modern, Bury, Fontana, and Manzoni. Most of all, I thank him for being a friend of the Smithsonian American Art Museum. We are grateful for that, and we look forward to seeing you here and also at the museum for future occasions. So again, grazie mille.
So thank you. I think it's my turn now or never. Thank you to be here. Thank you, Stephanie, for your kind word. Absolutely, I'm so thrilled about to be here. And you know, 3 people in this room has to close a bit of their eyes and say, we did it. And I'm referring to Amelia, to Karen, because they came here 3 years ago. Do you remember 3 years ago? So, and now we did. It's amazing. So I would say thank you to them, because they were really pushing me, sending me thousands of emails. Have you done this and done this and done this? And we did. And as soon as we decide just to do this, I would discover that is too much as to be seen, too much as to be told. I have to fight with Terra Foundation maybe in the future, because they have to support us to continue this series. As Julia said before, 3, this is the open gate. After 3 will be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on, because it's really an incredible field. We discover, and as Esther, I was talking about the relation between Italy and the United States, and when I came just to the United States in 2005, I was exploring exactly this relationship between the 2 countries. So it's a lot. really, it's a lot. And every single time I say, oh, we missed this one. Oh, God, I missed the other one. We went to the Burri exhibition at the Guggenheim. We went to the Futurist exhibition there. And every single time I say, oh, we are missing this. Oh, we have to tell about it. We have to tell about this, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this is only a starting point. We were together with Ester Coen, and I really wanted to have Ester Coen here. According to me, she's the major. So don't blush, don't say, turn, close your eyes, close your ears. She's really amazing. She's really one of the best professor, connoisseur about Italian art. She's amazing, and she's a dear friend of mine, and she's humble. It's a really rare quality between friends, and because everyone says, but she's really humble, she's really dear, she's really in the deep connoisseur of Italian art. So I was creating, because we were sharing the PowerPoint, and I was creating just this PowerPoint just to support her. Do you know what I mean? Because she's talking about the relationship after the Second War. I would like just to point out some theme, little bit, just to point out something. First of all, I suggest you will buy this beautiful book made by Carta named Rome, New York, 1948-1964. This is the cover of the book. With the Rauschenberg Fetici in Rome. And this is an incredible book, and you can find on website, maybe on Amazon, really good, that you can explore much more the theme of the relationship between Italy and the United States. I decided just to have the title of my presentation behind painting, because this is this is was the title of the exhibition I did at the Tate Modern, dedicated to Burri, Fontana, and Manzoni with Matthew Gale. And we were working for less than 2 years just to put all together this exhibition. Just it was named one of the best exhibitions of 2005 all over the world. Why? Not because of me or because of him, but because we were exploring some unknown subject. So, put apart, open another page of the book, and just to understand better the relationship between Italy and the United States, we have to consider that nothing happens magically. So when I go just to an exhibition in the United States, and I saw just their talk or speak about an Italian artist, these artists came from the sky. Okay, wow, no, it was a long process. Every single artist has a background. Every single artist has just a research. Every single artist has just a movement behind. It is really important just to include the artist in a movement. It is the peak of the moment. Great, I'm totally agree, but we don't have to miss the movement. We don't have to miss the research. And between Ester Coen and I, we really would like just to explore this theme of relationship. Okay, she will start from 1944, 44, 45, after the war. I will point out a little bit some artists in that moment later, but I would like just to give her just a background. What do you mean background? I'm going a little bit at the beginning of the century. Yes, we are talking about the new art for a new world. This Tatlin was Russia. His desire was just to okay, this is another world, darling. What we are talking about, what we are really want to tell about the new world, a new world where science is much more close to art, where Maxwell discovered that you can move your energy and you can describe the energy with waves, straight lines, so unbelievable. And in the meantime, Picasso say we must not discriminate between things. So we can put in this canvas, in this field, in this new dimension, we have to put different materials. And I would like just to quote Boccioni. I'm humbly quote Boccioni because Esther was just she wrote the general catalog about Boccioni. And Boccioni says, I recommend that you choose the most avant-garde materials, ugly, disgusting. So I wrote, I discovered just letters by Boccioni who wrote to his friends, says, you know, go in the garbage, take something, and I'll put on canvas. So that's it's the theme. And so in such a way, you understand better than when Rauschenberg put his bed on the canvas, was not related with Boccioni at all, but both researchers went just in the same direction. Do you know what I mean? We have to explore, we have to open our mind, much more our mind. And always by Boccioni, what we create is nothing but a bridge between the external plastic infinity and the internal plastic finity. So go and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Sorry if sometimes I'm stopped, because this is the third lecture of today, and the other two were just in another subject. So I have to close my mind and say, where am I now? Okay, yes, this is the right moment. So if I stop, don't be afraid. Forgive me for a second. So we can put 20 different types of materials can be used in the single work of art, and this was written in 1912. And we say what we create is just a bridge between two, as I say, plastic infinity and plastic infinity, and we can put example like glass, wood, card, iron, cement, horse, air, leather, cloth, mirror, electric lights, all together, and this all together is art. A little bit tough for that moment, because really tough for that moment, because we continue to be, I don't say accustomed, I say addicted to the 17th century aesthetic. We still want to have the reproduction of the reality. We still want to be, oh, I can make this. Oh, I cannot make it. It's beautiful. There's so many people go to the museum and say, on the gallery or wherever in the fair, say, oh, I can make it. I don't like it. Because we are accustomed, we are addicted to an aesthetic, to a totally different aesthetic. So this is we have to open our mind every single time. I used to say, be humble, learn a new alphabet. Please be humble. Don't be fixed in your crazy idea. Be humble and learn a new alphabet. And so I thought that it was breaking down in several materials. We can achieve a dynamic element. So now what we can see, this is art action as a desire, aggression, possession, joy, brutal reality. This was still the manifesto of futurism, and we have some idea that for sure we can have in some Italian artists or some American artists, not related exactly like this or to this world, but related to the theme, related to the research, related to the idea. And so I every single time I say, this is really tricky, because every single time we approach new art and we have to decode our alphabet. We have to decode ourselves. And as we say in Balla, this is the speed of a bicycle. So a motorcycle. So can you understand this much more better? Okay. And another things I want to point out is really, it's really important. Tactilism. When I did the exhibition about futurism in Brussels for the Italian government, I was creating really a section about tactilism anyway. Why? It's totally unknown. We are losing our touch. So, and Marinetti in 1921 was teaching us how we can have different relationship with touching, and we have to educate ourselves about touching. So, a first category, extremely confident, touch, sandpaper, silver. The second category, silk, crepe. The third one, velvet, wool from Pyrenees. So, do you know what I mean? And he was teaching us how to educate ourselves as we have to educate ourselves in a different way when we see a different kind of art. We are really short. I really would like just to point out what the research in Italy, the import about matter were made by Enrico Prampolini, who did in 1914 this beautiful béguinage. What is béguinage? Was the first time an artist in Italy, because as well in France in that moment were the other one, but in Italy he pointed out just béguinage. Béguinage was a retire for old people or nuns, and we have some different elements put just in the canvas, and just to describe not only the canvas. They are telling us a story. So, do you know, this is just a jump from only to see something, but in the meantime, these are described something and they are telling something. They are telling an history. They are telling a novel to us. And this is before the second world. He was talking about polymetric art. So, as I say before, when we are talking with Jasper Jones, we are talking with Rauschenberg about polymetric art, we have to see that in the meantime, without any connection between the two, Italian and American one, we have exactly the same kind of research regarding polymetric art. And say, okay, matter is a living organism or having a formal transcendence. So, can you understand? A simple stone or a simple something has just a soul inside. This is totally different. This is totally, totally different. This is amazing, according to me. And so what we see is exactly a glimpse between reality, is a glimpse between history, is a glimpse between collective history and personal history. And for example, this quote is made by Fontana, who said Boccioni was referring to Boccioni a lot in his life. In his last interview, he was talking about Boccioni for a long time. And he said, okay, matter can also spread light. And it's incredible how this, if you think really clearly in your mind, you can see how a matter can, when an object is invaded by light, you can see better. You can have just another shape of the object. And so this is the new material code. This is something that we share with the Italians. This is how the surface of the painting, the canvas became an arena. an arena when you can put together. You can put object, you can put history, you can put wherever you want, piece of paper, wherever. The important is how you can communicate this stuff, these artworks to your audience. How you can create just a bridge between you and them. It's really important. And now we came here. I decided just to take this quote from Elio Vittorini, just because in this moment after the Second War, we became much more friends with America. And he said, and America is no longer America, no longer the new world, is the whole world. Why? Because the Italians recognize, at the beginning of the century, if an artist wants to be famous, he wants to be updated, they would like just to go to Paris. As everybody used just to go to Paris, because Paris was, with their fair market, was just the right place in the right moment. But after the Second War, everybody wants to be in New York. And so the America became exactly a simulacrum of life, and the Italian art turned into American art. Oh, yes. Really important in this moment, I don't know, it's not my fault. And I don't worry. Every single time we have to look for some right place, and we have absolutely just to think a little bit more, which is the right place in that moment. The right place in Rome in that moment, just to spread the news, was for sure the Galleria del Corso, made by Gaspare del Corso and Irene Brin. Irene Brin was just in the fashion world, so she brought so many American artists, a new fashion, a new how to look the new art in Rome. And we see them in two moments, unbelievable. And in the right moment, another place, this is in a small world in Rome, was the Galleria Gaspare del Corso. In the big world, big moment was for sure the Biennale of Venice. It's really the right place. And the Biennale of Venice was and changed a lot. We see here Luigi Einaudi, Peggy Guggenheim, and Alfred Barr at the 24th Biennale in Venice, 1948, where Peggy Guggenheim brought 136 items for 70 artists, including Gorky, Motherwell, Pollock, Rothko, and blah, blah, in the United States for the first time. So the first time the Italian audience, because they couldn't go to America for a long time. I remember when I did that exhibition of Morandi, I was so surprised when Morandi couldn't go to America. Can he go to America? But he preferred just to see all the artists at that moment from paper, from catalog, not going there. Just to give just a little bit of a glimpse of what the collection of Peggy Guggenheim was. This is a William de Kooning, 1948. And in the meantime, this was the major event in 1948. The second one was in 1949, when the 20th Century Italian Art in June at New York Museum of Modern Art was the first time artists as Guttuso, Pizzinato, Afro, San Tommaso, Basardella, and Corrado Cagli came together to be exhibited in an American museum. Was curated by Alfred Barr, who was just curator for MoMA, Sobi, and give just okay, we are doing together. And from that point, from that exactly point, we see another path. We are exploring another path. Okay, we have the Biennale of Venice in the middle. In Rome, we have Gasperi del Corso Gallery. What happens in London? In New York was the Viviano Gallery. Viviano Gallery, we can see Catherine Viviano, Afro and Birolli, and the Viviano Gallery presented in 1950 5 Italian painters as Afro, Cagli, Guttuso, Morlotti, and Pizzinato. In 1950 as well, Pico Guggenheim presented the Museo Correri in Venice, and then later, we have some other exhibition all over. And we have a Capogrossi on 1950. I want only to say a few words, and I don't know if Esther will explore, but this can be just a theme for the next lecture. I would like just to point out 8 artists who are Afro, Dorazio, Nivola, Savelli, Scialloia, Maccarelli, Nangeroni, and Scarpitta. The third one were born in United States. The other one came. If you only think about that, Afro shared the same studio with Willem de Kooning. And there are so many correspondence. When I did the exhibition about Afro, I discovered in the archive in Rome so many letters made by Willem de Kooning to Afro. They were sharing the same studio. And okay, I have the privilege just to meet in person Scarpitta, and when he died, I was there in 2007, and we were really close friends in such a way. I love Nivola, and I would like just to point out that we did here at the Philip Collection. I was the curator of our exhibition about Nivola at Philip Collection here in Washington, D.C. Savelli, it's really incredible. And just to mention a few, there are really close relationship between them. That 8 artists came to United States for a long time. Afro went just to teach at Mills College. Dorazio went in the meantime to teach college, and he founded with Savelli a contemporary art gallery here in the United States. So there is a lot of, as we used to call and to say, ambassador of America art in Italy, and as well just the bridge between the two countries. I say at the beginning, I continue to say, what we did with Karen and Amelia in the last 3 years, we have to repeat shortly, just to go deeply into the research. There are really something. Every single time I pick up a book and I receive an article, every single time I find something new that has to be explored. Unfortunately, my day is 24 hours. I really would like to have more. But every single time, I really would like just to see and to have time to research. If you see, for example, some painting from Afro and de Kooning, they are equal, but not because they are copying each other, because the research brought them in the same level in the same year. Do you know what I mean? It's not about you copy me or I copy you. No, we are doing together. And this friendship, brotherhood, it's really something that we have to explore more and more. Ma, I don't want to be long. I'm now sitting down because Esther has to tell more and more about her research. Thank you so much. Esther, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Renato, and thank you all the organizers of this wonderful conference. I've read the program and I'm looking forward to these 2 wonderful days. Now, Renato, thank you for this introduction, so kind and so nice. And but just a second, I think we have a problem with. Have to go back. Okay, yes. No, and thank you very much for heating the audience, as you said, with your brilliant talk. And I won't be so brilliant, but I hope patient and that you will listen to my words. Now, I think I have to add a few things before entering into the topic. I guess that everybody was expecting me to talk about futurism, but sometimes I get bored with my subject. So I decided to shift into a new subject, but new and old, because I've always been exploring those shores. And also because I was very big friends with Toti Shaloya, who used to tell me a lot about America, and Gabriella Drudi also used to talk about her relationship with all the artists, but also with Harold Rosenberg. So this is one of the subjects that I think still have to be explored. One thing I wanted to add to what Renato said is the 1936 exhibitions of Alfred Barr, the two top great exhibitions, one on cubism and abstract art, where in fact futurism was given big importance, and the other one is fantastic art, Dada and Surrealism, where De Chirico was in fact seen as the first visionary artist as a let's say the artist who opened up to Surrealism. So I think that yes, a lot has still to be told about the relationship between. So mine will be let's say a general talk, and about the exchange, mostly in the 60s and the 70s. And sorry, I will be reading because I feel a little bit more confident. The 60s was the period during which the definition of the quintessential positions on both sides of the Atlantic occurred. From Europe to America, stylistic assonances and correspondences transmitted messages of subversion and vitality, definitely breaking down the boundaries between object and vision. And here you see a few, in the slides, you see this exchange and the relationship between Afro and de Kooning, Renato was mentioning before. The notion of contemporaneity was manifest everywhere in a spatial temporal encroachment in Italy as elsewhere. A new intellectual lingua franca emerged at this time from the debate on Marxism, historicism, idealism. Phenomenology and existentialism provided the basis for a new perception of experience, leading to fresh encounters with the real. Other terrain was thus explored in the search of a dimension in which the realms of anthropology, psychoanalysis, semantics, the esoteric, and others still, all up till then unrelated to aesthetic thought, might combine and coexist. Among the key authors was Michel Foucault, to arrive only later to the United States and in a more academic context. Foucault, who in the wake of Walter Benjamin formalized a philosophy on modernity inseparable from classical knowledge, the foundation of an entire construction of thought and vision. And here I quote, "What is available to archaeological analysis is the whole of classical knowledge, or rather the threshold that separates us from classical thought and constitutes our modernity. It was upon this threshold that the strange figure of knowledge called man first appeared and revealed a space proper to the human sciences. In attempting to uncover the deepest strata of Western culture, I'm restoring to our silent and apparently immobile soil its rifts, its instability, its flaws. And it is the same ground that is once more stirring under our feet." End of quote. In this lies, above all, the essence of a passionately experienced diversity between Europe and America. It was a reality, fragmented, intermittent, suspended, that in the 60s generated impulses of rebellion, polemical and vigorous forces. Different, but certainly not incompatible, was the atmosphere of the period in the dynamic encounter between exhibitions and exploration, in the attempt to discover a common ground for exchange, in brief moments and occasions of felicitous coexistence, transformed in the memory of those who experienced them into fleeting yet incisive moments. Diverse territories, the two sides of the Atlantic, territories characterized by firm ethical reason, cited as examples of different sensibilities. At stake was the meaning of an art like Italy's, which, in contrast to the pragmatism and process-driven orientation of American art, entered into dialogue with the surrounding world with the spontaneity of an immediate and rapid impression. Stylism and formal analogies, although partly the result of artistic developments drawn from the same sources of modernism, derived energy and scope, also critical for a new ordering of the visible. Was it not perhaps in Cubism that the futurists glimpsed the premise for a response, while nevertheless capturing the value of that expression and the radical nature of its instinct to deconstruct? Was it not perhaps that very same fragmentation of form that paved the way for a verification of the theories on movement? And was it not from Cubism that Malevich and Mondrian drew the first formal suggestions for the construction of autonomous visual systems? But the true turning point lay in Dadaism, the structure for a decisive break and the opportunity for renewal, identified in the figure of Marcel Duchamp, particularly on the American side of the Atlantic, the initiator, inspirer, the true revolutionaries, the silent dynamiter, the generative force for the pop, the minimalism, and the conceptual artists. On the Italian side of the ocean, the lesson of Dadaism was to linger merely as an echo of irreverence and negation, of playful nihilism, against a background dominated by the lesson of futurist impetuosity and expansionism. The verification of the state of art in Italy and the creation of a place, one that was metaphorical, which was different and would recharge the energy of the historical avant-garde in Italy, was to be channeled through the work of two great artist figures with an international outlook. And these are the artists Renato was talking about previously. Lucio Fontana and Alberto Burri. In Fontana, spatiality and light in the lacerations of his celebrated cuts and innovative force were the successors of a tradition, just like Renato was mentioning, and the synthesis of technical knowledge, immediacy, and thought. In Burri's work, on the contrary, it was the materials, textures, composition that emitted a dimension more historic in sensibility, following the lines of a color range and almost Renaissance-like pictorial structure, as was indeed pointed out by many critics, above all the most famed art historian Cesare Brandi. Also of great significance in those years was the exploration of Totti Scialoia, a true conduit, together with his wife Gabriella Drudi, for dialogue between two artistic cultures. Well, here I'm putting together a few images of Scialoia with Calder, and on the right, you have a drawing by Gaston mentioning Gabriella, and obviously it is Gabriella Drudi, Gabriella Scialoia. And you have on the lower left, David Smith during his work for the Spoleto 1962 exhibition with Carandente. So I'm returning back to Totti Scialoia and his thoughts written upon his return from America in 1956, still brimming with that experience, combined with a phenomenological sensibility, touched upon the common ground of impasto and material shared with his friend Burri, and orientated towards a non-objectual reality. And here I quote Scialoia. Now, painting acts directly on the material, and the painting is first and foremost a thing, serving no purpose other than to have received your spiritual imprint. Paintings as traces of life, fragments along the way, scorched grass on which you camped to sleep, hems caught on thorns. In every era, painters express themselves with signs on surfaces. With signs on surfaces, today's painters express this idea that man is spirit and earth at the same time, word and at the same time blood, and that not only the physical effigy of man is human, but everything that man recognizes and identifies, everything he imagines, everything becomes waxed as soon as he names it. End of quote. Naming something, where the physicality of the artist and of the work, although sublimated, nevertheless remains a sign of a resistance with regard to tradition, technique, art. The fracture between the two cultures, Italian and American, had not yet occurred. The linchpin was Jackson Pollock's remarkable revolutionary act, who, through the impetuous nature of his gesture, brought closer together two visions that were yet to go their separate ways. The Europeans of his generation and the next admired in Pollock the explosive force of the physical act, of the total engagement, the greatness and dramatic quality of the painting, the sense of individuality and of freedom, a force that confronted and measured itself in the very act of creation, capable of overturning spatial, temporal coordinates, and above all, of shifting the eye onto the horizontal plane of the surface. a new vision of art in which the gravitas, axis, and weight of the work shifted towards the plane, towards the ground, in a dimension that reached limitlessness, and which would would alter the perception of American artists as well as Europeans. By the late 50s, Rome had already become a center of attraction for America and a place for its artists. De Kooning, Calder, Rothko, Gaston, David Smith, Motherwell, to name but a few, spent long periods in Rome and the surroundings with their friends Scialoia, Afro, Dorazio, Consagra, Milton Gendel, invited and attracted also by the cultural openness of a strong and imposing personality such as Palma Bucarelli, director of the Galleria d'Arte Moderna, as well as by enlightened collectors and gallery owners like Giorgio Franchetti and Plinio De Martis, who were receptive to stimuli on the other side of the Atlantic, as Yannis Kounellis, one of the major figures of the Roman flank of Arte Povera, was to recall. And here I quote Kounellis. La Tartaruga, De Martis gallery, was a focal point for Italian culture. And here you have, you can see on the left side, on the left-hand side, Zara and Duchamp in Rome in 1963 at La Tartaruga. La Tartaruga was a focal point for Italian culture. I collaborated with this gallery, and it wasn't only Twombly you met there. I remember Rauschenberg, Franz Klein, De Kooning, the Italian artists Manzoni, Castellani, Burri, and Fontana. La Tartaruga was a forum for debate. Galleries were different then. It wasn't only the market that counted. Rome was different too, thanks also to the cinema and literature. There was true exchange. The atmosphere was international. The love we all had for the United States was justified by the presence of these great figures, including Pollock, who exhibited at the Galleria Nazionale d'Arte Moderna in 1958. Naturally, Kounellis is talking about a show that was organized in New York and then traveled in Europe. In this climate, Pollock was the reference point that enabled subsequent generations to transcend physical and intellectual limits. From that freedom, young Italian artists embraced the spirit and ideas that would mark for them the beginning of an individual journey. Here you have Kounellis in the gallery of Plinio De Martis, La Tartaruga. But the young Italian artists had a different notion of space. For these artists, the interiorization of visual and internal coordinates was rooted in a millennial history that could not be extinguished at one fell swoop, and still relied on models they themselves had taken up for battle. Burri and Fontana, not to forget the younger Piero Manzoni. First and foremost, space, the space of the painting, the space of the image. A space whose infinite, naturally you see also the space is also related to the at least in Kounellis, for his love and his interest in Russian art and in Russian constructivism. A space whose infinite references revolved around the primary models of objects and phenomena, around nature, the interjection of a perspectival vision, around history, expressed in a language in which the mythical and original meaning condensed at the very heart of the apparition. In the occurrence of the event, measured on the infinite hidden traces of an identity of vast human perspectives, compressed by temporality within the dimension of the work. In the 60s and the 70s, this constituted the grounds for the emergent Italian art. Space as assimilation of thought, not as mutation or as manipulation, or even as exaltation of fixed coordinates. The codification of a new means of expression and of new systems into which to channel what remained of tradition, a moral sense, measure, a physical and metaphorical measure. And also the specter of the fresco, the power of the rhythms, the tension of sculpture. Themes and processes that would mark the true boundary and the substantial difference to the American exploration of the minimal or the conceptual and of primary structures. And here I quote an American artist, a shape, a volume, a color, a surface is something itself. It shouldn't be concealed as part of a fairly different whole, affirmed Donald Judd, one of the American protagonists of the exhibition Primary Structures in 1966. Meanwhile, from the shores of the Mediterranean, Arte Povera countered with a more wondrous and cosmic vision. And here I quote one of the Arte Povera artists: "Even if one is elementary, one has to cast a spell on oneself. Otherwise, we are not artists. You must start from something that involves the ability to give shape to form, the ability to create a form. The form comes after." Dimensions increased, conjuring up signs that grew at the rate of biological proliferation. If painting was speed, it was so in every sense and in all directions, from past to present to future and vice versa. The starting point was in the artist's mind, to externalize the possibility of a notion of contradiction, to counter artifice through progressive growth, or else observe, frame, focus, capture vibrations, make appear simple acts, natural gestures, yet grandiose and epic nevertheless. Gestures alluding to primary human experiences, telling of an age in which all things proceeded at the same rhythm of the universe, of a remote age in which the fracture between word, figure, act had not yet happened. In search of that rhythm, that pleasure in nature, where caprice and invention, logic and reason merged into a whole, though imperceptible fragments, infinitesimal slivers of a great mystery. Light, heavy, visible, invisible, liquid, solid, inert, dynamic, polarities of a non-antinomical universe, revealed instances of a same latent energy. And here I quote an Italian artist, Pino Pascali, who belonged to who was one of the major figures of the Roman side of Arte Povera. Unfortunately, Europe's space is a space very different to that of the Americans. Rather than belonging to the action, it belongs to a reflection on the action. It is basically the problem of the Italians and of the Europeans. It requires the intensity of those who have nothing truly to create something for oneself. This is what Pascali declared. Sculpture also reinvented itself, subtracting from the pure forms of nature its own compositional elements, giving rise to realms of invention, fresh tautological truths within the visual system in which the real regenerated itself as a form of the imagination. It drew inspiration also from the iconic grandeur of the monuments, of the ruins of the Roman world, to create a new topography of vision, to amplify in a theatrical manner the emptying of meaning. And the seduction of an austere grandeur in white marble, the neglected magnificence by then reduced to a dramatic travesty of classicism, became the empty setting of the vast ruin of two dramatic decades, the parody of a parade's spectral absence, reminiscent of the Chirico, clad in a fresh, new coldness. In an Italy caught between persisting rural traditions and post-war industrial renaissance, the abandoned building of an entire neighborhood, such as that built for the never-happened 1942 Esposizione Universale, evoked by a curious analogy the stage settings of Cinecittà studios. Stiff, icy, simplified, those buildings inspired by archaeology, columns, staircases, arches, were not too distant from that world of forms and prototypes, exhumed from the repertoire to perpetuate instead the legendary image of the Roman civilization that was then resurfacing in a triumphantly different way. Of American filmmakers, Rome embarked on the Dolce Vita, and Cinecittà became Hollywood on the Tiber, with innumerable lavish productions, including Ben-Hur, Cleopatra, and the fall of the Roman Empire, interspersed with those of a more popular mythological nature. And so, those fantastical reconstructions of imperial Rome, transient and insubstantial, propped up on fleeting supports for an ephemeral temporality, while evoking timeless episodes in a history of past splendor, were superimposed on that image of an archaeological city still scarred and bearing the wounds of a war so tragically recent. Settling like a further layer of memory to swallow up and bury the various surfaces on which they rested, a sediment of orders and figurations, straddling the representation of a metropolis, aspiring to modernity, but nevertheless shored up by piles of papier-mâché. This nostalgia for the Roman world was interwoven with another, bubbling with ideas, which witnessed in Rome, in the person of Scialoia, the catalyst for an extraordinary situation. An eclectic, cultured, sophisticated artist with a passion for poetry and theater, who traveled extensively and had contacts both in France and America, he was one of the instigators of a new direction. and held the intellectual curiosity of his pupils, markedly of Pascali, whom you see in this image, and Cunellis. Thus, that expression of Romanness was then to encounter also the more dramatic vision of the thwarted action of the existential vacuum so densely delineated in Beckett's world of emptiness. The absence of a narrative, the ruthless lucidity of the absurd, the fragmentary, the inconclusive, the ruthless lucidity of the absurd, the fragmentary, the inconclusive, the enigmatic repetition of a pattern, the sublimation of the elementary nature of matter, emptying, became also for the artists incisive themes and formal processes that shattered logic and the power of a proposition. The sense of a breached, split image penetrated in its turn the imagination of Pascali, where the emphasis on fragments and details, for example, in his playful tribute of 1964 to Billie Holiday, highlighted the ambiguous search for a balance between the European and American dimension. Not only that of pop art, which had made a triumphal entrance at the Venice Biennial that same year. I have to recall that that is the year when Rauschenberg won the prize, but also of an earlier one, abstract expressionism. For example, in de Kooning, another of Shaloya's American friends, whose women were still closely tied to the singularity of the subject. History inspired elsewhere the sense of a perspectival space with materials and elements extraneous to art, but not to the past or to the myth, in the physical dimension of a notion of representation, or else choosing to trigger from the limitless repertoire of art history dialectic short circuits between differing temporalities. It rejected history for Cunellis, in particular, a history in which legacies of indestructible knowledge coexisted, carefully distilled to achieve an ideal measure of scansion and Renaissance centrality, as in the cadenced rhythm of the space of his horses at Latico in Rome in 1969. But neither for Cunellis nor for Pascali was it Duchamp's logic that articulated the choice of the objects in a territory entirely to be reinvented through the destruction of the concept of the work, nor the Dadaist sense of accumulation or the found object. That logic belonged instead to Richard Serra. Just to make a parallel, because this is the first exhibition Richard Serra had in Rome in 1966, and it's his first solo exhibition at La Galleria La Salita, and this is these are pages from the catalog. And here I'm quoting from the catalog. The work involves a placement of juxtaposed materials for the sake of the idea, the projected sexual metaphor. Medium is mixed, animals are used as sex, containers as sex, experience as sex. My ambition is to present a daisy chain. Similarity between Serra and Cunellis in the determination to go beyond. Here you see the two photos, the photo of the opening of Serra exhibition and the detail of one of his works. similarity between Serra and Cunelis in the determination to go beyond the confines of artistic practice in accordance with the procedure launched by the happenings. Duchamp was everyone's clandestine master, but Cunelis's intention was different. He imprinted onto his radicalism the dimension of our origins in the survival of the contradictions, nuances of the past, the measure of history as a collection of icons and myths was thus consolidated in the physicality of the real and one of its principles of representation. Further arguments for indicating an otherness, also intentional, for establishing a barrier with regard to the language of pop art and the object as a means of comparison. Once again, it was Cunelis who highlighted the difference. These artists, and I'm quoting Cunelis, these artists leave no opportunity for life within the experience of painting. For example, the difference between Cy Twombly's painting and that of Lichtenstein. Cy's lasts because there is a preparation behind his gestures. Inside, there is something intimate and extremely intimate, while Lichtenstein has a much more external quality that leads him also to carry out the experience in a critical sense. End of quotes. When Cy Twombly chose to settle in Rome in 1957, following a trip to Europe and North America a few years previously together with Rauschenberg, it was due to his fascination with echoes of the Mediterranean and the sensibility for where painting, but also history, lie. On a canvas overflowing with references and fragile memories, like lyrical fragments, emerge the signs dusted by the era of myths and legends, poetry and blood, to compose the fresco of the epic vision of an artist still receptive to the echoes of the past, capable of translating them into a contemporary language. That language of narrative cyclicity, remote from the icons of the present, so emphatic in the 9 discourses on Commodus of 1963, caused a profound break with the American world, a break that would only heal decades later. And while the singularity of Twombly's position in the artistic climate of the New World was then perceived as a reassertion of old Europe's hegemony, it was instead to encapsulate the true moment of encounter between the two sides of the Atlantic, between an empire that had faded centuries earlier and an empire in expansion whose power was represented in the unfolding wings of an eagle, once the indelible symbol of the prestige of imperial Rome. Thank you.